What's up, nerds? It's your boy, the OGGM, coming to you live from Site B at 8:30 in the morning, the 16th day of December 2022. 54 degrees and cloudy here at Site B, and I'm drinking coffee. Speaking of which, warning, this is a monetized video and a sponsored video from my sponsor. More on that later. So if you don't like ads on your YouTube, probably should skip ahead. I'll give you a sec. Alright, it's a lazy Friday morning here at Site B, so it's time to dip our toes in the end of the week tabletop role-playing game news, all the bits and bobs of news that we might have missed that doesn't involve Wizards of the Coast. I'm sure there's some around here somewhere about what's going on in the tabletop role-playing game world that doesn't involve Wizards of the... I mean, there's got to be something, right? Oh, hey! Henry Cavill! Superman! He's sort of in the tabletop role-playing game news after oh my god, this guy just can't get a break. They kicked him off Superman. Again, they just hire him back to be Superman. They go through this whole big thing about Superman and Harry Cavill being Superman. I'm probably saying your last word wrong, sir. And then, oh, well, no, Henry, you're gone. No, sorry. Yeah. You're not Superman anymore. I don't know who it is, which is causing the speculations about him returning to The Witcher after he left The Witcher, possibly being the next James Bond. A lot of people have said it would be him. Or him maybe producing his own Warhammer film. So there's the gaming connection. We know he loves Warhammer 40k and Warhammer games and stuff, He's probably the biggest defender / supporter / celebrity for Warhammer 40k. He is to Warhammer 40k what Critical Role, I promised I wouldn't say that word anymore. Critical Role is to D&D, so good on you, Henry. There's something in the tabletop role-playing game news that doesn't involve Wizards of the Coast. The potential of a Warhammer TV show or movie with Henry Cavill and somehow involved within it. So, yay, Superman. I mean, Christopher Reeve will always be Superman, but, you were the second best, probably. Just never got a chance to really be Superman. Okay, more not Wizards of the Coast news. This comes to us from Yahoo Finance and the Wall Street Journal. So, two research sources that are completely unreliable in regards to the futures of tabletop role-playing games between 2023 and 2027. What geographic and what games are being looked at for being the industry leaders? So, in regards to what areas of the world they think are going to be the main consumers of tabletop role-playing games, North America, Europe, Asia, South America, and the Middle East and Africa, in that order. Would have thought Asia would have ranked higher, but okay. North America is number one. Yay, us. And as for the companies that they think are going to be making an influence in the industry in 2023 through 2027, at number one, it's Bully Pulpit Games. What do they make, though? I don't even know what game they make. Number two, Free League. Of course, Free League, continuing to knock it out of the park. Number three, Chaosium, makers of, what is it? I don't know. Call of Cthulhu, number one role-playing game in the world. Number four, Wizards of the Coast. Chaosium ranks higher than Wizards of the Coast. Number five, Son of Oak Game Studios. Number six, Paizo. Oh, wow, Paizo, that sucks. Number 7, Modifius. Number 8, Magtime Games. Number 9, Pellegrin Press. Number 10, Pinnacle Entertainment, creators of Savage Worlds. And number 11, Evil Hat Productions. Those are the companies that Yahoo Finance and the Wall Street Journal feel are going to be the most influential in the industry between 2023 and 2027. Surprise at number 1 is Bully Pulpit Games. No surprise, free a login at number 2. Call of Cthulhu. I thought that would rate higher, but okay, whatever. Demographic-wise, who's going to be the main purchasers of tabletop role-playing games they consider between 2023 and 2027. Children below the age of 18 ranks number 1. Number 2, 18 to 35. Number 3, 36 to 49. And number 4, old farts like me. And as for who will be being the main, where those places will be purchased mainly, number 1 is retailers. Though it looks like they think big box retail, or at least online retailers, are going to be the main distributors of a role-playing game. Direct to consumer or via e-commerce site. So that's like drive-through and stuff like that. So there we go. But of course, we don't know how that will change because of the influence of COVID and the Russia-Ukraine war, how that will affect sales in Europe and places that are being affected by those things. So there's some news from Yahoo Finance regarding what they think is going to be going on in the tabletop role-playing game market in 2023 through 2027. Let's take a break before we dive into the big stories. Coffee. I love you, coffee. Wizards of the Coast time. Oh yeah, we couldn't do Tabletop Role-Playing Game of the Week without getting back to our friends over at Wizards of the Coast. And mind you, I don't hate Wizards of the Coast. I don't hate 5e. I love 5e. I love Dungeons & Dragons. I love talking about this. And I love the disaster Wizards of the Coast is making out of the hobby. Because without Wizards of the Coast continuously, non-stop, just Daffy Duck exploding themselves in the face, I wouldn't have a job. Could you imagine? I mean, every single day for the past year, there has been some nonsense related to Wizards of the Coast. Name one day this year where I didn't post, except for the days I don't post anyways, like Sundays. God love you, Wizards of the Coast. God love you for keeping me in business. Okay, Wizards of the Coast story number 1. The conference call between Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast to share the latest in regards to Hasbro and the finances and what they want to do with Wizards of the Coast going forward between 2023 and 2027. So as we know, in this conference call, apparently 5 million people worldwide are playing D&D on and off at any given time. Of those 5 million, only 40,000 actually filled out the surveys in 1 and 2. So that's 20,000 for one D&D survey number 1, and 20,000 for one D&D survey number 2. So out of the 5 million plus people playing D&D at any given time over the world, only 40,000 total have contributed to the one D&D surveys. The new CEO of Wizards of the Coast, Cynthia Williams. Oh, D&D has had a great year. It's got more popularity and more eyes on it than ever, you know. Brand recognition is at an all-time high. Hasbro, you're not making us enough money. We want to monetize D&D more going into 2023 to 2027. People got upset about this. What? How dare you say that? Blah, blah, blah. But there's a couple things you got to unpack. There are facts in there that people seem to have forgotten or have chosen to ignore in responding to this. 1, Hasbro expected to break $1 billion this year solely from Wizards of the Coast. Between Magic the Gathering sales and D&D sales, they were looking for $1 billion+ year by the end of 2022. That was their predictions at the beginning of 2022. This was probably their fault because they were basing it on the money they made in 2021 and 2020 without taking into consideration the fact that the things that were in play in 2020 and 2021 were no longer in play. We're outside again. So that 2020, 2021 money you made, there's a huge demographic that doesn't exist anymore. So it was very, very much probably not the best idea to go, we think we're going to make $1 billion. Add to that, stock dropped. Hasbro stock dropped 40%, which means if you bought shares at $100 and bought 10 shares for $1,000 total, those shares are now worth about $440 each, which means if somebody who had, say, 10 shares sold them now, you'd maybe make $500, $700 back. Yeah, so 40% stock drop for Wizards of the Coast, unheard of. Second, that multi-million-dollar drop between Q3 this year and Q3 last year. All of that pretty much laying on the heads of Wizards of the Coast. Why? Well, partially the mishandling of Magic the Gathering, and partially just the utter disaster that Dungeons & Dragons has become and the total lack of sales. Don't believe me? The facts are out there. Look them up. D&D is not selling. And then they invested a whole bunch of money in D&D Beyond. Now, in 2020, Hasbro's CEO came forward and said, this is what we're going to do. At the beginning of 2022, Hasbro's CEO came forward and said, this is our plans from 2023 to 2027 and which ones we're investing in and the directions we want to take D&D. 4 months ago, at the end of the summer, when we had PulseCon and San Diego Comic-Con and the board members meeting and the shareholders meeting, Hasbro CEO came forward and said, this is our plans for 2023 to 2027, how we're going to monetize Dungeons & Dragons and how we're going to respond to this huge loss. Last week, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast CEO, we want to monetize Dungeons & Dragons more and take it into a digital process. And people are like, oh my God, how dare you, Wizards of the Coast? How dare you, Hasbro? And Hasbro's like, well, we need the money. And we told you we were going to do this in 2020. Don't you pay attention to what we say, or you just ignore these facts so you can continue to be angry at us? So, for anybody who, I guess, chooses to ignore the words that are coming out of my mouth, let me just remind you what, again, for those of us who've been paying attention for the past 2 years, this should come as no surprise to anyone that they're doing this in 2023 because they said they were going to do it in 2020. So in regards to what they mean by the monetization of Dungeons & Dragons, let's go over this again because apparently I'm still being misquoted. So let's break this down to simple facts. Monetization of the Dungeons & Dragons IP versus monetization of the Dungeons & Dragons RPG. Okay, we're going to use props. Prop time! Dungeons & Dragons, the role-playing game IP. Dungeons & Dragons, the merchandising IP. This is worth more than this. So they want to make more of this. Toys and things with the D&D brand on them, like Mr. Dragon here, are worth way more money than D&D the game. Okay, so what they're talking about with the monetization is more of this. More of this. More of this. D&D the breakfast cereal, D&D shrinky dinks, D&D cartoons, D&D notebooks, D&D cards. Things that doesn't cost them a lot to make, that they can make a lot of profit off to make up for the money that they lost between Q3 last year and Q3 this year. Now, this shouldn't come as a surprise because they said they were going to do it in 2020. In addition, they are taking Dungeons & Dragons digital. They have been repeatedly telling you they're taking Dungeons & Dragons digital. You can deny it all you want. You can make up whatever reality in your head that you need to make in order for you to maintain your anger at me. But the fact of the matter is, Hasbro has been saying since 2020 they're going to take it digital. Why? Well, because they fucking hate the OSR. No. No. It has nothing to do with that and everything to do with this. And once they take it digital, they plan on monetizing it. What a stupid idea. Who would do that? Nobody monetizes videos and digital content. Everybody monetizes digital content and video games. The video game online marketplace is a thing. People spend millions of dollars every year on online marketplace items that do not exist in the physical world. Documentaries and news stories have been done on this. Look at for what Path of Exile. Path of Exile is a free game that is constantly being updated and constantly has new content every 4 months for free. How do they make their money? From online transactions. People spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars every year, Path of Exile, to buy hats for their character, or better looking bases, or a pet, or effects so that it looks like their character's on fire. Do these effects, do these cosmetics have anything to do with the actual gameplay? No. They just look cool, and people spend money on them. Hasbro is planning to do the same thing with D&D Beyond. They're already doing it. They're already hiding D&D Beyond content behind paywalls. They're planning on doing the same things with the upcoming D&D digital video games like Baldur's Gate 3, Neverwinter Nights, D&D Online, whatever else they decide to do video game-wise. The games based upon the movie, that's going to all have digital marketplaces. The VTT that they have planned to come out for D&D in 2024, maybe. That's going to have a digital online marketplace. So when you make your character, say you want to make, I don't know, human wizard with glasses, and you get this. Vaguely humanoid, glasses, looks kind of like a wizard. But you're like, no, my wizard wears blue robes. Bam. And Hasbro goes, well, you can download the digital content to make your character looking like they're wearing blue robes. It's just going to cost you $5. And you're going to go, well, I want to make sure my wizard looks like the way I purchased him, so here's $5. What has buying these wizard robes done for you in the game? Nothing. But people are going to do it, and Hasbro knows people are going to do it. At least they're counting on people who are going to do it. So, once again, in regards to the phone call, in regards to the monetization of the Dungeons & Dragons IP in 2023 to 2027, in regards to the people who are talking crap about me, excuse my language, Dungeons & Dragons the IP versus Dungeons & Dragons the role-playing game IP are two different things. So when they're talking about monetization, they're talking about IP. This sweatshirt with a dice on it, this dragon, this coffee, digital marketplaces, cosmetics for your characters and their product is what they mean by monetization. They want to monetize D&D, the brand, more because the brand has more legs for them financially than D&D. Even if 5 million people are playing D&D at this point in time, they're not spending that much money on D&D. Most of the D&D money comes from DMs, and a lot of that is online money. Physical products are not selling. Digital products are selling. PDFs are selling. D&D Beyond downloads are selling. They're easier to get. More and more people are getting them because you don't have to lug around 20 pounds of books when you can have everything you need right here. Okay? So that's what it means. So that was the big Wizards of the Coast story in regards to the whole monetization. The second biggest thing, of course, was 1D&D and race versus species and the whole nonsense that is that started, and the whole Veruca Salts, where they're just like, we know you gave us exactly what we asked for, Wizards of the Coast, but we're still upset. And Wizards of the Coast did something they said they were going to do with D&D. It's not like it's a surprise. They've been saying they were going to change it since before Tasha's. So at least 2 years. It should not come as a surprise. A lot of other games have already done it. Paizo Pathfinder 2 got rid of race. Changed it to Ancestries, I believe. Level Up 5e got rid of race. I believe they changed it to heritages. A couple other games got rid of race, changed it to another word. No big deal. You know why it was no big deal? Because what they did is they just changed it. They didn't ask your permission. They didn't do questionnaires. They simply said, bam, it's changed, moving on. And the reaction to Peso changing it, the reaction to Level Up, the reaction to the other companies changing race to whatever it is they called it now, non-existent. There was no backlash. Wizards of the Coast copies them, does the exact same thing, something they said they were going to do 2 years ago, or whenever Tasha's came out. No big deal. Except they made a big deal about it. Jeremy Crawford comes up and does a 40-minute, basically documentary, self-congratulatory video about how Wizards of the Coast is being up there with you kids and your new updated stuff by changing race to species. And this caused a landslide of negative responses. Strangely enough, 90% of that negative response to the change was not from the OSR. It wasn't even from the 5e fan base. It was from the Twitterverse. It was from the Kwans and, those guys. Daniel Kwans, Connie Chang, Jay Willis's, those guys. The other guy whose name I won't mention. They're the ones who are upset about the change. They're the ones who are saying, Wizards of the Coast, you gave us exactly what we asked for, and we're still angry at you. They're the Veruca salts. The fan base are the ones who are upset about the change. So, yes, Wizards of the Coast, still in the news, despite all my attempts to talk about anything else in the gaming hobby. Also, our boy Ben from Questing Beast seems to have got himself for trouble for simply stating facts. Ben from Questing Beast made a video the other day about how there seems to be a lack of 5e DMs compared to 5e players, and that was responded with several negative responses from the 5e fearmongers, including a couple threats. A couple threats tossed to poor Ben, simply for saying a mathematical fact, that it was proven. There are more DMs, there are more players for 5e than there are game masters for 5e. This should not be an upsetting number because that's been true since day one. There has always been more players for D&D than there have been game masters for D&D. More people want to play than want to run. That's just the way it is. And most DMs wish they were playing. But nobody else will run, so they have to. And then you're stuck being eternal DM like me. That's been true for every iteration of D&D. That's also true for every other role-playing game, including Castles and Crusades and Call of Cthulhu and the OSR and every other game. There is always going to be more players than there are DMs. You knew this. There's absolutely no reason to get mad at Ben for Questing Beasts over the video. But then Ben went and made another video about how D&D doesn't need Wizards of the Coast anymore because other people are making content for D&D. And again, simply stating a fact that was 100% true, he got another round of hate mails and how dare yous and threats and you need to change and blah, 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 fear-mongering, mostly from the same group of people, the 5e fear-mongers, the saber rattlers, these this group of 7, 8, 10 people who just latch on to anything and try and turn it into a negative thing about the OSR and a negative thing about 5e, and 5e is not the 5e that they think it should be. Okay, so D&D no longer needs Wizards of the Coast. That's absolutely true, because anybody can make content for 5th edition. I can make content for 5th edition. You can make content for 5th edition. This dragon can make content for 5th edition. And you can publish it as long as you follow the steps in the 5th edition OGL. There are tons of people all over the world making third-party content for 5e. So D&D doesn't need Wizards of the Coast. Hasbro could shut down Wizards of the Coast tomorrow, which they probably should. They don't need Wizards of the Coast to make D&D because they own D&D. Not Wizards of the Coast. Hasbro owns Dungeons & Dragons. Wizards of the Coast is just the production company. But Hasbro owns the name. Hasbro owns everything that has to do with TSR, with D&D, whatever. So if tomorrow they said, you know what, we're just going to produce it in-house, or we're going to ship it out to a third-party producer like Renaissance Games, or, because you guys are a logistical press nightmare right now. They could do that. They don't need Wizards of the Coast to make D&D. People like us can continue D&D even if Hasbro said, we're done. Because we already own it, and it's already online, and the OGL is huge. And the OGL just doesn't mean people playing old games of D&D and being angry at Wizards of the Coast. We can also now start including people who just want to play 5th edition and not deal with the 5e nonsense that is coming out of Wizards of the Coast and the 5e nonsense that is being perpetrated by the shallow end of the 5e pools. People just want to play. They don't care about the politics anymore. I've been playing 5e consistently for the past, since 2014. And all that bullshit that happened in 2014, 2016, the Mercer effect, the purple-headed sparkle trolls, that's all true. That did happen. The I don't feel I'm represented in D&D, that's still happening. That shallow end still exists. But in regards to the other stuff, the stuff that they're talking about now, that hasn't come up once at the 5e table that I've been sitting at for the past 4 or 5 years. Because the actual 5e players, at least for me, where I am, don't care. They just want to play. 5e is just a game that they want to play. They just want to roll dice and hit monsters and have a good time. So they are, the type of players who would also be like, hey, let's play another game. Let's play an OGL. So these are, these aren't the ones that are upset. And yes, these are the ones who are getting the backlash for Wizards of the Coast response that, according to Hasbro, and according to Ben at Questing Beasts, D&D doesn't need Wizards of the Coast anymore. And I'm sorry, there was absolutely no reason to go after Ben, because guess what? D&D doesn't need Wizards of the Coast. I'm drinking coffee. But not just any coffee, because this is a sponsored video, so I want to take a shout out right now to my sponsor, Kuso Tea and Coffee. In case you haven't noticed, I haven't drunk any soda in several weeks. And you want to know why? Because these guys have sponsored me. These guys have sent me samples, and their coffee is pretty darn good. And I'm not a coffee drinker, but they have switched me over to coffee and tea. And I got to tell you, I don't regret it. Everything about their coffee I'm enjoying. I'm enjoying the taste, the smell, the process of making it, the fact that they're locally owned, locally marketed, non-GMO, free-range coffee beans. I don't even know if that's a thing, but I'm going to say it. Cruelty-free coffee. Again, I'm not sure if that's a thing, but I'm going to say it. It's coffee, and they have tons of flavors. Right now I'm drinking a vanilla flavored. And, I didn't need any cream or sugar. It just came out great, and I'm drinking it black, and it's perfect. I'm enjoying the flavor. So thank you, Kuso Coffee and Tea, for sponsoring me. If you want to pick up your own flight of Kuso coffees and teas, check out the link down below. My affiliate link gets 17% off all purchases to the end of the year. Support Kuso Tea and Coffee and support the OGGM, because this is my job. And I want you guys to have good coffee and good tea and good snacks. And if I didn't like it, I wouldn't support it. So if these guys can get me to stop drinking soda, at least at home, their stuff's got to be good. And then I drink their chamomile at night to help sleep. So yeah, thank you, Kuso Tea and Coffee. Affiliate link down below. Support the OGGM Adventures. If you have any more stories you want to talk about this week in regards to the tabletop role-playing game news, let me know. I've been doing this for 30 minutes. I think I deserve a break. Maybe I'm going to make a bagel. Apparently, I am a member of the OSR Elite. I guess that was supposed to be an insult, but obviously the individual who's been saying it doesn't know what elite means. So thank you. I will gladly be a member of the OSR Elite. Free advertising. Stop talking about me, dude. Just stop talking about me. Till next time, get off my land, buy my merch, and have a great day.